I am concerned that immigration levels are very high in this country. I'm concerned that of the 1.2 million people that came into this country, we don't have exact figures, but a large percentage of them were Muslim.
In 1 year. 1.2 million in 1 year.
In 1 year.
Yeah.
A large percentage of them were Muslim. Probably more Muslims came into this country in that 1 year than we have Jews in this country. And we know that significantly high percentages of Muslims tend to hold anti-Semitic views or dislike Jews and don't like. So we have more people being brought into the country who potentially dislike Jews than we have Jews themselves every year. And then we had a recent stabbing of three children, little girls, which was horrible. And the immediate aftermath was people protesting against mosques and things like that. And then we were told by Keir Starmer and a lot of other people, no, this is not a Muslim thing. This is misinformation. And it later turned out, well, actually, no, this was a Muslim. It was an Islamist attack.
Well, do we know it was? We know he was an Islamist and he had Islamist manuals to produce bombs and threats, but we don't know if this specific attack was. I feel a bit stupid saying it, but
I know what you're saying. You've got to be careful.
Yeah. Right? But there's a difference on the when it comes to evidentiary standards. There's a difference between the evidence you need to prosecute someone and between the evidence you need to arrive at a reasonable conclusion. So I think, even though on a legal level we can't say this was definitely an Islamist attack. I mean, this was a guy who had Islamist manuals from ISIS and he killed people. So put two and two together. And
I think enough, again, that burden of proof you speak of being different for actually arresting someone, I understand that. But for commentators to be able to come out and say, hey, this is an issue.
Discussion,
Yeah.
I think immigration for me, it's interesting. You see it about Muslims coming. For me, it's much wider than Muslims. For me, and it's also wider than Jews. You said worried about Jews.
Well, Jews first, then the rest of the, that's my feeling. Once Jews are eradicated,
Jews are almost the canary in the coal mine, where when Jews are feeling unsafe, I think wider society is in a bad state.
Yeah.
But I think there's the element of violence and extremism and religious intolerance that comes with mass immigration from countries that don't share our values. I think there's also the economic argument. Many of the people that come are going to be a long-term drain on the economy, severe long-term economic drain on the economy. I saw figures. I don't remember the details, and I'm never good with details, but there was an OBR report that came out a few weeks ago. I think we're talking something, I don't know if it was 100 grand per migrant in a lifetime or per year, probably in a lifetime. 100 grand in a year seems a bit high. But the thing is also, when we talk about immigration, different immigrant groups are different and have different impacts. So this is both, if we divide it in terms of income brackets, so high-skilled versus low-skilled, very different impacts, but also by country of origin, if they're coming from the EU, outside the EU, and even outside the EU, it really depends what country. One of the big problems is the government is being very obtuse with publishing the data. It's the government doesn't publish data on benefit dependency and crime done by country of origin. So by immigrants of country of origin, they don't publish the data. There's been requests by MPs to get the data and they say, oh, it's too difficult to do. So they basically don't want us to see the data, which I think in a democracy, we need transparency. We need to see. There's one country in Europe that does publish this kind of data. It's Denmark. It has very detailed data, breakdown by region, by country. Quite predictable, the results, but very, very clear. Immigrants from certain places have a net negative impact on the economy. Immigrants from other places have a net benefit to the economy. Economy is we're talking. There's a few aspects. There's kind of how much you pay taxes and how much you take out from the welfare state. There's also how much you'll end up costing the state in terms of prison services, for example. And then there's also the social cost to which comes with when there's increased crime or increased extremism from certain groups, that has a severe social cost as well as an economic cost. So, the immigration levels we've seen in recent years are criminal. They're criminal. It happened under the Conservative government. Unforgivable. What's been done. I think the full impact probably will only know kind of when it's too late, kind of And usually with these things, it's 10, 15 years later that you realize how bad this decision was. The government needs to be more transparent, needs to publish the data, and we need to be much more selective. And also, not only that, for those who are already here, and by the way, I don't believe in kicking people out who are citizens. I don't, some people say, deport, or I don't believe in that. I believe once you're in, you're in. Which is, by the way, why for me immigration needs to be done so carefully, because it's irreversible. Once you're here and your children are here, you don't get kicked out. So we need to be super, super selective with who comes in, because it's forever. So I think for those who are here, we need better integration policies. We need to be much more bold in demanding that people who come here integrate into British culture, adopt British language, adopt British values. Values is very difficult to enforce, but policies that are geared towards that, because an integrated society is a healthier society. A cohesive society is a healthier society.
Yeah.
It impacts free speech as well, by the way. I know you care about free speech. Every society, every community, every speech community has an Overton window, right? Of what is considered acceptable and what's not. Every community. There's no community that has maximal free speech. You just say whatever you want. Everyone has that. When you have a society that's largely homogeneous, there's a broad consensus about what's in the Overton window and what's not. So the thing that most people want to say, they can say without any problem. When you have a society that's not integrated, that involves lots of different insular communities, each of these communities has a very different Overton window. Okay, so what's in my community considered perfectly legitimate to say is in your community considered completely unacceptable, and vice versa. And these communities start fighting on silencing each other. Okay, so this is why these days in academia or in journalism, there's a shrinking of what you can say. You have to be more and more politically correct, often not to offend people who come from a different worldview and a different community to yours. So yeah, I think an integrated society is super important and beneficial on all levels, and a society that's more and more fractured, that's driven apart, the value systems of different elements of society start being very, very different and perhaps exclusionary and incompatible. That's worrisome.
I can see why you don't want to lay the blame at Islam, because it's inflammatory and in some respects maybe unnecessary. But what I would say is, with regards to what you said about free speech and the Overton window, I think that's really interesting. But I don't think we're having those issues with, say, the Romanians are not happy with how we're speaking, and the Poles, and we're not having really that issue with the Hindus and the Sikhs. We don't have that issue. Well, but I don't think it's about. I don't think it's specifically about Islam. I think it's the more incompatible the cultures are, the wider the gap in value systems, the more you're going to see these issues coming to the fore, right? Yeah. So and the pace at which they come, because then they're in these groups and they don't have time to adapt with each generation. That's
another thing. Yeah, if you come in such large numbers, you can't integrate in wider society, because you're going to be lumped together with other people who came and who share the same country you brought from home. So you're not going to integrate.
Like the English in south of Spain. I mean, all the English have gone there and they've just made it England, Benidorm. Right. And the Spanish aren't happy.
Right. But the reason we don't see these problems with the Romanians is simply the cultures are less incompatible. They're broadly Christian, they're European, right? So the further away in culture you're going to be, the more of these issues you're going to see. So Islam is one part of it, but I don't think it's just Islam. I think, I don't know, you have people coming from third world countries who may not necessarily be Muslim, and you're going to see similar issues. Perhaps it's going to express itself less in the religious extremism kind of way, but you're going to see similar things in terms of economic questions, crime questions. I don't think Muslims are the worst performers when it comes to crime. I think there are other groups.
The Denmark's the stats you talk about, I think they did suggest, is it MENAP? Is that what it is?
Middle East and
what's the N?
North Africa.
North African.
Yeah.
Pakistani.
Middle East, North Africa, Pakistan. I think.
And there's Afghanistan in there somehow as well, I think, in the acronym. I think maybe African and Afghanistan, they've just used 1A. I don't know. But those are the areas where we're having the biggest issues. We're talking about assaults on women.
Right. And those do happen to be Muslim areas. So you think it's about Islam.
I've convinced you. But no, it's not about, you're right. It's not about Islam. It's about mass immigration and uncontrollable and not thought out However, the issue at the end of that, unfortunately, is Islam. If we didn't have Islam, it wouldn't be quite the same level, and we wouldn't be having such a problem with free speech being different in different parts. These different Overton windows we have.